My apologies. Once again, that sticky microphone button doesn't like to work. So my apologies. Cup of coffee to get me through the day. So, anyhow, what do we want to talk about? We got a few things to talk about. This is going to be kind of a little bit more informal. See you there, Will. Good to see you, buddy. Little bit more informal today. Not really the most formal thing. I don't want my microphone in front of my face, so that way you guys can't see this beautiful bearded mug. But there was in the world of baseball, there was an incident that happened the other day, and us in St. Louis are very familiar with this particular situation. But we've all known and we've all understood that Albert Pujols is probably getting towards the end of his career. I think there's been a lot of people that have held out hope that Albert may potentially come back to St. Louis on some kind of a DH deal. It was never going to happen. I mean, yeah, it sounds romantic and all that stuff, but it was not going to happen. He had that 10-year contract with the Angels, which is expiring at the end of this season. And then he's got the 10-year services contract to obviously follow that up. But his wife, if I'm pronouncing her name correctly, Deidre, I believe that's her name, Deidre. Correct me if I'm wrong, but she had posted on her Instagram account of Albert no longer playing anymore and retiring after this contract is up. Now, here's the thing. I'm usually fine with that. Usually you'll see a player's agent or managing, team that will announce it. They might announce it on their Twitter. A team might announce it through their social media accounts. But to see a spouse of a player announce it before anybody else announces it, I don't care what the situation is, that's bad form. Because as a spouse myself, and many of you out there in the world of the internet also have spouses of some shape or form, you wouldn't want your spouse to go and prematurely announce your retirement if you weren't ready to retire. And so that really kind of like, as soon as that came out, I was really like, oh, it's, unless I'm seeing it straight from the horse's mouth, which would be Albert himself, I'm going to stand pat on that. And just ironically, a few hours later, she issued a form of a retraction on her Instagram, a correction, if you will, that said she was not saying that he's retiring, but, just kind of pointing that out. And so that was, one of those things where I just kind of found it funny. But, those things happen, and, we just got to kind of go with it. Now, here's another thing that I want to talk about. Obviously, and this is in the NFL side of things, if you're following the regular happenings with the NFL and kind of what is going on with the shift of players going certain places, but this Carson Wentz trade that has happened from Philadelphia to the Indianapolis Colts, if you haven't seen it or heard about it yet, you're hearing about it here first, which is great, but I highly doubt it because it's been out for several days. It really surprises me, meaning the fact that the Eagles fired Doug Peterson. I really thought that they would end up keeping Carson Wentz. That being said, maybe the Eagles organization has come to the realization of, okay, we need to pull the plug on this and we need to move forward. We're going to draft a quarterback. You might be seeing the Eagles moving up in the draft. What do we have? Like 40-something days until the draft or something along those lines? I don't know. I have to look at it again. But I'm definitely going to be following that. I might even do a live draft show because I think that would be kind of fun a little bit, at least for like the first, so many picks. I'm not going to sit there for 3 and 4 hours doing a live draft show with you guys. It's just like, oh, so-and-so at the 23rd pick out of Northern Iowa. Nobody wants that. So we might end up doing something a little bit fun, and we might do like a top 10 or something like that. And we'll just say, hey, here's my top 10 list. What's your guys' list? Who do you think's going to go where? Where do you think teams are going to trade? I think you might see some movement here. I think you might see some trades happening. I think you might see some stuff. So we'll stay tuned on that. But going back to the Carson Wentz thing, I think that's probably the direction that the Eagles might be potentially going, is moving up in the draft, possibly, and selecting one of those top flight quarterbacks. But it remains to be seen. Good for the Indianapolis Colts and landing a quarterback of his caliber. Hopefully he still works out. Let's just say he's been kind of here, but he's got a lot of potential upside. I still think there's better quarterbacks out there. I kind of attribute Carson Wentz to kind of a Ryan Tannehill type of quarterback. I think that's kind of where he ranks in the hierarchy of things. Now, the more interesting one to me was actually Matt Stafford going from the Detroit Lions over to the Rams. Now, there's a lot of people, especially over there. Pardon me while I take a drink of coffee. That's delicious coffee. Good stuff. So I think that Matt Stafford move is more of a, hey, let's try to stay competitive. Because let me tell you something, the Rams need to be, and the Rams organization needs to be terribly concerned about the future success of their franchise in the Los Angeles market, because they now have the Chargers nipping at their heels. If the Chargers end up having a large amount of success here over the next 2 to 3 years, making the playoffs, having top flight players and things of that nature, still playing in that stadium, and you outdraw the team that owns it, that could potentially end up blowing up in your face, which, couldn't be, I don't take any glee, if you guys know me, in that, Stan Kroenke potentially losing possible millions or billions of dollars. That would never bother me. So, I think it's, for the Rams, it's more of like, hey, let's just throw shit at the wall and see if it sticks kind of thing. And we'll see how that works out for them. They still have a really good defense, but their offense is really severely lacking. They're trying to cut payroll. There's a lot of things that are going on there. Let's talk about spring training. I think that's what everybody wants to get to. I'm so ready for baseball. After this last huge, snowstorm that we had, it was, minus 10 degrees, minus 15 degrees in some places. It was down here. I can tell you that for a fact. Having to be out in that stuff, it was not the most fun. But I am ready for spring. I'm ready for spring training. I've been watching the YouTube videos over on the St. Louis Cardinals main page over on YouTube, and watching kind of the interviews and the press conferences and things like that, and trying to stay in tune with what's going on over there. Make sure you guys go over and you check out our other shows on GatewayCitySports.com. Go over to the podcast page, tap on that, and you'll be able to see all of the shows that's baseball oriented. And, 2 for 3, Team of Rivals. We've got a couple other shows that are really starting to kind of get going over there, so you guys really need to go over and check those things out. And if you haven't added them on Facebook, make sure you go over and do that too as well, because they're streaming over there, as well as other platforms. So make sure you go ahead and add all that. Now, obviously, another thing that I want to discuss before I get too deep into this, because we're about, 10 minutes in so far, is that this show is now being not only simulcast over multiple different entities, but it is also being put out now on podcast form, so that all of you that are at work, that you don't have an internet friendly connection, because some of us folks who were at work, I used to work at a place like this, to where they actually block Facebook, or they'll block YouTube, or certain access to certain things. But with podcasts, you can just download it to your phone and you listen to that. So that's what we're going to try to do from here on out. So that way, if you're sitting at your desk, or you're sitting in your office, or wherever it is that you're at. Maybe you're a landscaper. Maybe you're out there and you're working with equipment and things like that, and you've got your hearing protection on and you want to stick a couple of earbuds in there. Maybe it's a Bluetooth hearing protection headset. You guys could listen to that on the go, because that's what we really want to start doing for you guys, is getting it out on multiple different platforms for you to be able to listen to. So, that out of the way, let's talk about spring training. I'm really liking what I'm seeing so far out of spring training. I'm loving what I'm seeing out of Nolan Gorman. Him getting in there, busting his ass. He's doing a really good job. He's trying to make things work. He's doing some different things. He's doing some different stuff. And I really like to see that out of the young man, because that really shows me he wants to be here. He wants to contribute. He wants to be a part of something bigger. So I like to see that. Now, what's interesting to me is what is going to happen with Matt Carpenter. Let's take another sip. Oh, man, I can't brag enough. Great coffee. But what are we going to do with Matt Carpenter? I know us fans, we will sit there and we will talk all day about Matt Carpenter. Well, we could do this. Well, if we had a DH, we could put him in there. We could do this or we could do that. Yeah, there's a lot of different things that we could do. The fact of the matter is, I don't know anybody that would want to put him in as a DH, irregardless. I mean, yeah, he's an okay hitter. He had one season, he hit 38 home runs? Because he changed his launch angle and, all these different things. Then they started playing him on the shift, and they just pitched him just a little bit differently, and then he was hitting into the shift all the time. So I don't see in any universe going forward where the Matt Carpenter thing works. Plus, the Cardinals are not going to want to pay him his incentives, his premiums that he has in his contracts, or his contract. To where if he gets so many at-bats, he's going to be owed that money. The Cardinals organization is not going to want to pay him. So whatever his number is definitively, and I don't know off the top of my head, so I can't tell you for sure, but I do know that it's a substantial amount and that the Cardinals are not going to want to pay that, especially for somebody that can't really play the field defensively anymore. He can't even throw 80 poo. I mean, he literally has no arm. Yeah, he's an accurate thrower, but he can barely throw across the field from third. What's going to happen if you have to put him at second, or whatever the case is. He just doesn't have an arm anymore. It's gone. So what do you do with Matt Carpenter? I think you use him as a pinch bat in certain situations. Yeah, you're just going to have to eat the contract. Thankfully, you've gotten out from underneath the Dexter Fowler contract, and you've saved a ton of money there. There's other places where the Cardinals could save potentially a lot of money. I don't know how much more they still have left to pay on the Mike Leake contract, if anything at all. I think they still have some to pay left on that particular contract from that trade with the Seattle Mariners. So there's that. There's still the Andrew Miller contract, which he's been at best. The Brett Cecil contract, which we all know about, the Dexter Fowler contract, which the Cardinals have ate a very large portion of that. The Matt Carpenter contract. Shall we go on? We could. But what's the point? We're just going to have to start bringing these young guys up. Now, the one big thing that I want to talk about, and I've had this discussion with friends, and I've had this discussion amongst the Gateway City family, and we've had this discussion within the Zone family. Jack Flaherty. What is going to happen there? What are the Cardinals going to do in that situation? That is going to be interesting. That remains to be seen. Now, why? What? How? Because let's face facts. I don't care what anybody says. He does, in the Michael Jordan documentary, The Last Dance, he does take it personally. And he's put that out on social media. And so I took that personally. The gift from the show, from the documentary. So, yes, I don't care what he says. I don't care what he goes out there on social media, what his management team tells him to say, whatever. He's gone, folks. He's gone. He's leaving, and he ain't coming back, okay? He's going to end up going to the Angels. He's going to end up going to the Dodgers. He's going to end up going to potentially the Padres. I know Ron's would just be rolling over if he heard me say that. But he's going to be going to a West Coast team, but could potentially be going to an Arizona Diamondbacks, something along that vein where it's over on the West Coast. Why? Because he's a Southern California boy. He wants to go back home. He wants to be in a bigger market. Some of you might know this, and some of you might remember it. Some of you might not. But Neil Lomax, on his way out the door, which you all can, see that up there, he had said that Fred Bird had more endorsements than he did whenever he was on his way to Phoenix. For a lot of years, Neil Lomax felt like the second hand. He felt like he was the third wheel. He felt like, I'm this superstar. I'm this great player. You should be treating me accordingly. You should be treating me on the level of an Ozzie Smith. You should be treating me on a level, but you don't even treat me on the same level as a Fred Bird. I hate to break it to people, but that's kind of how Jack Flaherty feels. I mean, I'm not going to make any assumption. I'm not going to sit here and point the finger directly and say that's absolutely what he's doing. But from the way it looks to me, he's a young man with a chip on his shoulder. And he should have one. He's a very talented, very great player. And he's playing this all the right way. So that way he doesn't look bad in the eyes of the fans. But, guys, I've been watching sports for 35 plus years. I've been watching all sorts of sports. From the NFL, Major League Baseball, NHL, NBA, I've watched it all. And I've seen the prima donnas. And I've seen how these things play out. Let's not forget the Albert Pujols situation in 2011 where he got his nose cut off because he felt like he was insulted. He wasn't respected by the Cardinals organization from the offers that they presented to him. So we can't forget that. This is different. Jack Flaherty sees himself as and I have to be careful here with how I phrase certain things, because he's not wrong with his viewpoints, especially some of his social viewpoints. He has every right to use his platform to be able to say what he feels is right or justified or what's wrong. I'm not going to get into that. But what I will get into is his attitude directed towards the Cardinals organization. Because why? Because he feels that he's owed something. This is the system that you signed up for, Jack. When you signed a contract and you put your name on that line, you signed up for this. There was no guarantees that you were going to get a multi-million-dollar, hundreds of million-dollar contract. Let me put it to you this way, folks. It's fresh in everybody's mind, the contract that Fernando Tatis Jr. has just gotten. It's fresh in the minds of people over the last couple of years what Bryce Harper had gotten, what Manny Machado had gotten. Received, I should say. Not got, but received. Now, let's look at other pitchers. Let's look at what Trevor Bauer got. For what, a 2-year contract, if I'm not mistaken? Correct me in the comments if I'm wrong. But a 2-year contract, he's going to want on that level or more, because by the time he comes out of his rookie deal and he's off of arbitration, he is going to be commanding, I promise you, $20 million a year. Are the Cardinals going to want to pay that? Not for a pitcher, they're not. So where do you draw the line? Where do things stop with Jack Flaherty? That remains to be seen. I'm going to be keeping a close eye on it, though. And an even closer ear. You got to pay attention and read between the lines. That's why a lot of people have come to me for NFL stuff, because I can read between the lines. And I could see what goes on behind the scenes and what happens when you remove yourself from that fanatical standpoint in your mind of being a ultra sports fan. Let's make something vehemently clear about myself. I love St. Louis sports. Period. St. Louis sports. It's an area where I was born up in and raised up in. I watched those sports my entire life, and I continue to. I'm not necessarily a hardcore fan of Major League Baseball, of NFL, of NHL, because I've seen their dirty business practices and how they operate. I'm not a fan of how those things are done. And especially once I seen and realized what it is that they actually do to you, the fans. That's why, and my good friend Will Freeman over here can attest for this. That's why we were so excited when the XFL came to town. Because it was finally something that us St. Louis fans could get behind and something we could root for and say, yes, that's ours. It was born here. It was raised here. It was built for here. It was designed for the fan in mind in this market. That is, to me, why that had so much success. Period. There's no other rhyme or reason for it. It's our team. It was created for St. Louis. Not to say that the Cardinals aren't a stalwart and have been here for 100 plus years. You know, that's great. How many football teams and NFL teams have we had? 2. Should have had 3, but we had 2. And they were both rejects from other towns. The Cardinals couldn't make it in Chicago, which came to St. Louis, and then bounced from St. Louis over to Phoenix, and then decided, well, Phoenix is too small of a name for us. We have to call ourselves the Arizona Cardinals. Whatever. Not going to get into that. And then the reject Rams, which were actually rejects from Cleveland that left and went to L.A. and failed there and left and came to St. Louis and then failed there and left and went back to L.A. and are going to fail there. And then where are they going to go? Where's the next place for the Rams? Because you know they're going to move again in the next, I don't know how many years. They'll end up moving again. You know, it's just that organization. It's just the way they are. They're never happy being in one place. And don't forget, too, and you can read it in my articles that I have over on GatewayCitySports.com and go over there and also check out all the other great articles on everything else. But I stated in a couple of those articles, and I can't remember which one off the top of my head, but it was one of my other articles, that the Cardinals, it might have been the good, bad, and the ugly, but I had stated in that the Cardinals actually tried to leave Arizona or Phoenix area in the early 2000s. We're talking like 99, 2000, because that market was still open. And the NFL was trying desperately to get an expansion team into L.A., which was failing miserably. And so, therefore, the Cardinals saw an opportunity, Bill Bidwell at the time, saw an opportunity to say, I'm not getting my stadium that I was promised. I'm, in this hot box out here in the desert playing games, and I want my stadium that I was promised. Because he still hadn't had it. So he held L.A. over their head, and eventually they got it built, which is now what? State Farm Stadium or whatever it's called now at this point. But that was one instance where the Cardinals tried to move again, and they were headed that direction. The Indianapolis Colts did the same thing before they got Lucas Oil Stadium built. The Seattle Seahawks did the same thing. They actually moved. They physically moved down to L.A., and the NFL said, go back. But once the NFL found out that the expansion team was never going to work without a team being a home base there, The original concept when the Rams were going to move out of St. Louis, they were going to move the Rams out of St. Louis. Let's be very clear. The NFL was going to move the Rams out of St. Louis, not because the fans didn't support the team or that it wasn't making money, but just for the simple fact of that they wanted a team in LA and an owner with deep pockets. The idea, the original plan was they were going to move this team from St. Louis back to LA with lineage and history to get the foot in the door, to get started, and then they were going to put an expansion team with the Rams eventually in a couple more years. That was the plan. That was always the plan. But, like they said, they had, because Dean had done everything that he needed to do in his market, supposedly. We could get into the semantics of that later. But he had supposedly done everything in his market in order to stay in San Diego or to leave, however you want to view it. But the fact of the matter is, that's how that all went down. So once you remove yourself as a fan and you start looking at it from a business angle and saying, stop being here and be here. Be on the level. And once you're on the level and you realize, oh, wow, they're literally treating this like a grocery store or like an office building, a company that runs, I don't know, I don't want to say too many, big corporate names, a large beer manufacturer. And you could be running that. You're running that for profit. You're running that to make money. You're not running it to appease the people who wear the sweatshirts and, take the tours of the facility and, go to the farm that you have and look at their horses and everything else. You don't do that. You do it for money. So I'll get off my stump about that. You guys don't need to hear any more about that. You guys have heard plenty. Let's go ahead and jump over into the comments section real quick before we end up closing things out for this week's show. I see Will over there. I see Arlington over there. And they're basically agreeing that, yeah, the Battlehawks are our team. That's a fact. And, you could go over on Facebook and, you could look at all the different fan groups and the amount of support. And I know Palmer Alexander III, the living legend himself, is going to just roll over whenever I say this. But, caw-caw. Love you, brother. Caw-caw. But, yeah, it's true. There's it's a different mentality that a lot of these fans have, so it's great and I love it. Will says that he saw the Al Davis versus NFL special. It was great. Unfortunately, that started the teams moving. That didn't necessarily start the teams moving. The teams were already moving. The only reason that had actually occurred, Will, and I'll explain it like this, it was to keep owners from going rogue and moving on their own. The NFL wanted to do this and put a thumb on it. They wanted to stop it because the one thing that they did not want was owners going out of their lane and doing whatever they wanted to do. They had to keep their owners in check. That's why they did that. And that's why the lawsuit started, because Al just said, hey, they'll just let any team move willy-nilly. And he was the one. Al Davis was one of the very few owners that actually voted against the Cardinals leaving St. Louis. He was one of the very few. I think it was him and the Miami Dolphins owner at the time. Joe Robbie, I believe. They were the very few. So, you got to give Al Davis credit where credit is due, because Al was the man. Should we talk about the Blues injuries woes? Yeah, sure. Let's talk about their injury woes. I believe that I had just seen earlier this morning or late last night, that was it Carl Gunnarsson, if I'm not mistaken. He's taken a downturn on his injury, and we're actually going to pull that up here real quick because I want to double check and make sure on that and what his actual injury was. Because one of the biggest things is you don't want to misquote the injury. They're saying he'll miss the rest of the NHL season with a knee injury. Now, I don't know the specifics on the knee injury, if it was an ACL tear or if it was something else that was going on. You guys can add in on the comment section on that particular thing. But, yeah, that's a biggie. Losing Gunnarsson for the rest of the season, that one hurts. And there was a whole other thing that I just completely shot over my mind was the Tiger Woods incident that happened the other day. Isn't that crazy? Tiger, man. In a rollover car accident, thankfully, from the reports coming out now this morning on February the 24th, the morning of, it seems to be like everything's going to be okay, but apparently he had to have surgery on his legs for some apparent reason. I guess he got pinned in the vehicle. Whatever the case was, I really hope there was no nefarious things that were going on there. I don't want to make any kind of wild accusations as to what was the situation with that. But, yeah, Arlington popped in and he said he thinks Tiger's done with golf. I can't disagree with that. I mean, with how many back surgeries has he had? 5? About as many as Peyton Manning's had on his neck. I mean, now this. He's got to be done. I mean, he's got to be. There's no way that, he could, come from that and play at a level where he could be successful. But, yeah, let's go back to the Blues. There's, obviously the Vladimir Tarasenko thing, with all of that, that hurts for the team to not have him in the lineup. For their line shifts and things like that. It's just that's painful to not have him there. To lose Gunnarsson, that one really smarts, because that one's a tough pill to swallow, because he's a, how should I put this? He's a grinder. He's a grinder. And I really enjoy watching him play. He's a tough, hard-nosed player, and I like watching him play. But yeah, I mean, and another thing that I saw yesterday on that particular subject matter with the Blues, there are actually people out there, and I am not even kidding you, that are actually calling for the firing of Craig Berube. Are you really, Chief? Seriously? The guy won you a Stanley Cup. Ken Hitchcock couldn't do that. I don't even want to mention the other guy. That's just how bad that was. Joe Quenneville didn't do it. How many years was he in St. Louis? Mike Keenan didn't do it. How many years was he in St. Louis? All the other great coaches that this team has had, they couldn't do it, but Chief did. Berube did. So for those out there that think that Craig Berube needs to be relieved of duties, you are off your damned rocker. You are nuts. Go crawl back into whatever hole that you crawled out of and just get the hell out of here, because you ain't got no business talking about anybody losing their job, especially after they won you the Stanley Cup. For Christ's sakes. Let's get off of that. That's ridiculous. So, I think that pretty much covers it for this week's show. Glad you guys could join us. Glad you guys could come in and be a part of it. Make sure that you go and add the show over on iTunes. It's over there. Go over to Gateway City Sports. Just add Gateway City Sports. It'll be right there. You'll get all the shows. And make sure that you go over to GatewayCitySports.com. You check out all the new articles. Make sure that you're going and adding in the Zone Network, Gateway City Sports, over on social media pages, Facebook, Twitter, the whole smash. We're all over the place. And, we'll see what ends up coming out of the sports world here over the next week when we come back next Wednesday at 9 a.m., and we'll talk a little bit more. It's just been a crazy last few weeks. And I know with all you folks out there, any of you folks that have kids and all that stuff. There's a lot of us that, some of us that still even haven't had kids going to school regularly. But then obviously with all these snowstorms and everything shutting down all the schools in certain areas, it's been really difficult on some people. So just stick with it, man, because I'm trying to stick with it myself. 2 little kids myself. But I think next week we'll probably end up back here having, we might change up some things. We might end up changing the rotation of the jerseys back here. We might add some things and take some things away. There's some stuff that we might end up doing, some shaking and baking there. But, man, I tell you what, I'm ready for spring training. I'm ready for there to be some news on the XFL front. So I'll definitely be tuning in to the XFL STL show, which is an In the Zone and One Universal co-production. And you can see that every Wednesday at 7 p.m. Make sure you add their Facebook page, XFL to STL. And let's get it done, guys. Come on, let's go. I'm ready for baseball. I'm ready for summer. I'm ready for the fun stuff. Let's go. I'm ready. Woo! This is Derek King from the Derek King Sports Show signing off. I will see you guys next Wednesday, 9 a.m. You guys take care. And keep your head above water. I'm rooting for you. Adios.